to be that. Yes, you can hear me. Yes. Okay. Hello. Welcome again. 15 minutes after I said I would start. That is very silly. I do apologise for everyone for messing everyone around. As you have very kindly pointed out, I am completely new and old. As I was saying to no one because it was silent, I was born in 1980, so I don't make it as a millennial. So I was born without a computer in my mouth, as it were, and I've had to learn everything with bits of paper. If I could show you the rest of my room, you'd see that I've just got loads and loads of books. Books is how I think about things. I still go to libraries as much as I used Google, so apologies for that. But so nice to see some of you and to have you here. It's great. As I was saying at the beginning, before I was so rudely interrupted by silence, the format for this is that I'm going to chat until about sort of 9:30, answering questions that are in the feed, and sort of like just to sort of broaden out some of the things that came out of the class last week. I was very much aware that we were kind of running out of time and that there were a lot of people and that not everyone got to ask questions, and that sometimes, just knowing that you've got someone to listen to your questions, however silly they might seem to you, when you're starting out as a writer, I know that that you everything is helpful, like whether it be a kind of a gentle nudge or a really kind of detailed answer. So hopefully we'll get to some of that today. So right. Thank you very much for writing in the feed. Please do start posting questions so I can have a look at what you want to know. But before we sort of start, I'll just quickly kind of tell you what I've been up to. First of all, I've been administering and planning the second session, which is next Tuesday, the 16th of June, working with my good friend Dan Rebelato, who is my favourite radio playwright. If you don't know his work, you should check him out. He's also an amazing person on Twitter. I think the only person who I've ever been in a meeting with and who, without my knowledge, has sent out a tweet that went viral. I think he said something funny about Alex Salmon, and this is obviously a long time ago. That was in the middle of a meeting, and I sort of went and checked my phone after the other meeting. I was like, when did Dan do that? I didn't even see him do it. Anyway, so Dan's coming along next Tuesday, and so is Lou Kemp, who is a theatre director and also a radio producer, and we've worked together. She's actually the person I've worked with most in theatre. She's not my radio producer, although we have worked a couple of times together. And she's also brilliant, and that'll be a really interesting, hopefully a really interesting session. So I'm going to get to some questions. I had a question from Charis, or Charis. I don't know how you say your name, Charis. I'm really sorry. I had a really good question, which was about starting out, and I'm going to check it on my phone actually, so I've got to make sure I actually get the wording right because I want to be able to answer it properly. Here it is. So the question is, if you're starting out, how do you build up to an actual play? What are the different stages you aim for? And is a 15-minute play an easier goal than a 45-minute play? Thanks for the question. It's a really good one. If I'm honest, the way I started was with a competition, as I think I mentioned last time, and that was quite interesting because they were asking for a twist on a crime and thriller genre, and they said it was a 15-minute play. And I was dead young at the time, and I hadn't written a lot of things to commission, but I found the prompt really exciting. And I think, for me, looking out for those kind of opportunities is a really good way of doing it. Sometimes when you're writing, I find I remember my agent, and I hope you'll forgive me for saying this, my agent when I was starting out said, what you've got to do is write a big play. And I remember thinking, what's a big play? What does that mean? And how do I do that? And I think I spent a long time worrying about writing a big play. and trying to write this kind of big 2 hour epic, which never really materialized, because 2 hour epics are quite hard to do. Um, and uh, and actually, what I noticed was that I was doing littler plays. I was doing 45-minute plays, or half an hour plays, or 15-minute plays, and I was doing them without really thinking about it, because I was always worried about this 2 hour big play that I should be writing, to become a proper writer. So, my answer is that there is something simpler in some form, in some ideas, about a 15-minute drama. And as a way just to sort of celebrate yourself, writing a 15-minute drama straight out the gate is a really good idea. Like, if you've written 15 minutes, that's fantastic. And it's something that people can look at, and it's something simple, and it won't take very long to read. And you'll feel like a sense of achievement. And I think sometimes that is really useful. What I will say very quickly, I say very quickly, I answer questions in a really long way, as you'll find out, is that I wrote a few plays before I wrote what I considered a good one. My first good play was half an hour radio drama for BBC Scotland, which very few people listen to, I think, although it has been repeated a couple of times. But I wrote it, and it was incredibly simple, and it was not the big play that anyone told me I should write. But I remember at the end of that feeling a real sense of achievement, that I'd written something that I'd wanted to write, and that it was something that I was happy with. And I didn't really need anyone else to tell me it was good, because I sort of knew it was. And that was an amazing feeling, and it kind of allowed me to sort of then take bigger and bigger risks. So that's a very long answer to say that you can write whatever you want to write, in terms of. But I wouldn't worry about trying to write a big play. Just write the play that you really want to write, and the story. And if the story is 45 minutes long, great. If it's 3 hours long, fantastic. You can write the big play, and my agent will be very happy with you. But if you write a 15-minute play, or even a 5-minute play, that is fine, because once you've done it, you're going to feel a real sense of achievement, and you're going to be able to move on to something else. And you're going to look back and go, oh, I wrote a 5-minute play, or I wrote a 15-minute play, and that's great. So I'm going to now look at the feed. Tracy Hayward, I wanted to know how you go from an idea and basic plot to a completely written script. Are there any devices or structures you have that are a go-to? Yes, there are. I do a workshop for my students, and I've done it around Scotland as well a few times, called 10 Brilliant Things. I'm not a planner. I think I may have mentioned this at the workshop. I don't plan a narrative. What I do is do the 10 brilliant things. And I like lists. Lists are great. Lists are helpful for someone who is, as I said, not a planner. This list of 10 brilliant things are 10 brilliant things that could happen in the play. I try and keep them visual, and I try and be as bold as I can. I literally don't try and make them explicable to myself. They're sort of felt rather than planned. You're just trying to write 10 things that could happen, and don't write them in any order. Don't write them in an order. We don't worry about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can draw them. You can get a big piece of paper, write them out on that, and just enjoy just enjoy the kind of the pleasure of creating. And what's fun about that is that then you've got the 10 brilliant things, and you can put them in an order. I do this with post-it notes, actually. That's what I do. I've got post-it notes here. So what I do is I write a thing on it, and I put it up on my wall, and I just write them 10, and I sort of play around with them and put them in an order. And then if I feel like that's enough, I can start. And often it is. It really does sort of work. It came about because I was working on a play a play in the theatre, actually, with two directors who were very visual, and they really wanted they worked in images rather than necessarily in words or character or story in the way that I understood it. So we kind of came up with this sort of technique, which was that I just got them to say a picture that they really liked, it's almost like 10 tableaus, I guess, but I call it 10 brilliant things, because I think as a writer, it's really exciting to aspire to a moment, even if you don't know what it is. I did it with the play a couple of years ago where I had one image which was a girl smashes a piano with a sledgehammer, and I didn't know what it meant or what it was for, but I just thought that was a really cool image, and I thought I wanted that, put that in a play. So that's how I structure stuff, and then I just sort of follow my nose. It's not the same as what I do for a pitch, but maybe someone asked me about that later on. Okay, so what is the one key piece of advice? This is Suzanne Elvidge. How are you doing, Suzanne? I hope you're well. What is the one key piece of advice you would give to someone wanting to write for radio? That is a really good question. One key bit of advice. Well, can I make it two? I would listen to as much as you can, the good and the bad. Decide what you think is good, because that's always helpful. And then I would try and write exactly what you wanted to write, and write it without any kind of censorship. I'm right in the middle of writing a radio play at the moment, and I write it with all the language and all the kind of taps on full. I don't limit myself or censor myself. I think it's really important to do that. I mean, I'm writing for the BBC, so of course there are rules, and there are things that they like and they dislike. You can fight a lot of them, you can play around with them, but I find it really helpful to to make sure that I am not censored in any way. And I think certainly my first, and this piece of advice comes about from my own beginnings really as a writer, which is that my first two radio plays, I sort of wrote what I thought people wanted me to write rather than write what I was passionate about. And I think that's a mistake. I think you've got to write whatever you want to write. The story you've got to tell is going to be way better than the thing that you think they want you to tell. So I think it's about sticking to your guns a bit. I hope that answers your questions. Great. Okay. Excellent. Charlotte has put in about Dan's amazing. Dan Rabelato's amazing tweet that he does at 10 o'clock, I think, every night, and has done for the last 4 years, where he tweets Donald Trump, night, you disgusting halfwit. That's really fun. Right. Okay. So, hang on, I've got a question from Lizzie there. Lizzie, is it best to wait for the BBC writers' room windows, or should we just politely fire stuff off to producers? And also, any tips on how to get producers' email addresses? Oh, I shouldn't really answer that question, should I? The last one, anyway. Well, I'll think about it while I answer the first bit. Is it best to wait for the BBC writers' room windows, or should we politely fire stuff off to producers? Do you know what? I think be discriminating. I wouldn't fire off to any producer. It's not really about that. At least in my experience, I've had the same producer almost my entire career as a writer. And the reason I think I've got a career as a radio writer is because I've got that producer who's my relationship with her is really close. In fact, she's actually the godmother of my son. And I think, and that's come about through work, I should say, that she wasn't that first. We didn't know each other before we started working together, and now we're very close friends. I think what I'd say is the BBC writers' room windows are really important. Definitely send stuff into that, and obviously that can be quite good in terms of like maybe hooking you up with someone you haven't heard of. And I also got I was also really lucky in that I got quite a lot of offers of workshops and stuff. So I got from the writers' room. I managed to get I got to be part of a course, a TV writing course. I mean, I don't write TV, as I think I've said, but it was interesting, and I met some other writers, which was really cool. So those are really important. In terms of, I think I said this, maybe I've already answered this, but I would say that what you need to do is for the BBC, what I would do is, I said, if you listen to loads and there's a producer whose work you always, you listen to the radio play and you love the radio play, and then at the end of it, it's like, and this was directed by so-and-so in somewhere, then write to them, because they are looking for new writers. They're always looking for new writers, looking for good new writers and writers who they have a relationship with. The other thing I would say, sort of finally on that point, is just to say that wherever you are in the UK, there will be a local place that they're making radio drama. So the obvious hotspots: Glasgow in Scotland, Belfast in Northern Ireland, Cardiff in Wales. There's Bristol, obviously, where I think they make the Archers, or that's Birmingham maybe. But there's Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, or Salford. Salford's a huge. In fact, I think that probably does the most business in terms of radio drama. So if you're in the north, Salford are definitely your people, and London, obviously. I think maybe there's Exeter, but I wouldn't swear to it. I thought there was, but maybe I'm wrong about that. And in terms of getting hold of BBC producers, should I tell you? Or, well, no, I can't. I can't tell you how to get hold of BBC producers. But what I would say is that a lot of them are on Twitter, and so you can at least write to them. And a lot of them do have they will have a kind of set a time where they're either reading stuff or they're looking for writers every year. So hopefully that's a way of doing it. But leave that question with me, because I might be able to give you more another time. Rob Curry, do you have any advice on formatting sound in radio script? Would you always put it on its own line, or would you include it alongside text or something else altogether? That's a good question, Rob. I think I write my radio plays like I do my theatre plays. In a sense, I just write the script as it works for me. I know TV writers write it as if they're writing TV, and I think those two things are the same. So sorry, what I mean by that is both approaches are acceptable. There are very few radio dramatists who are just radio dramatists, at least in training. They probably came from one or the other, either TV or theatre. So I tend to write the scene, and I will. I write the stage directions and the scene exactly as I would a play. I don't really. I think I said this in the workshop. I don't really write sound. What I tend to do is write the world and the picture. So, for example, I've just written a scene. I'm writing a play called The Tenderness of Boys, which is all about a sort of event that didn't really happen, which is that I bumped into my dead mother in Marks and Spencer's, and what happened then. And it's sort of fantasy, I suppose, about having one more day with a loved one, and that's what I'm writing at the moment. And there's a scene in it where I fall asleep in the library, and I don't write the sound of the library, other than saying it's a busy metropolitan library, because it's the library in Glasgow. And I think that is enough of a cue or a clue to the producer and to the sound designers to put in that element. And that's kind of how I do it. And so when I would say, and she leaves and slams the door, which of course is an excellent stage direction, you should all do it. I love doors. And the doors in radio drama are always really fun. If you do that, then you don't have to qualify it with. You can talk about its quality, I suppose. You can say she closed the door quietly, or she closed the door with a slam. But I wouldn't go into too much detail if I were you, because you're stepping on someone else's job, and someone else can interpret that for you based on the characterization of the story. Also, because it's a bit of a waste of your time. I sort of always think put as little down on paper as gets the job done. That's kind of my rule of thumb. Okay, so Ethan, hi Ethan. Where do you draw your influences and ideas from? That's a good one. I think. I go through little obsessions, I suppose. I go through things that I go through writers. If you're talking about writers' influences, I go through moments where I'm really into poetry, or I'm really into novels, or I'm really into plays by American women, people like Annie Baker and stuff, and I will kind of get slightly obsessed. I had a John Fosse phase Jon Fosse, the Norwegian writer, a few years ago, and I just read everything. So I sort of, as I've got older as a writer, I've allowed myself to sort of follow my nose, and I think and just allow myself to be influenced by what I'm interested in that moment, and that's quite empowering actually, because rather than saying this is what I do, I'm a Chekhovian naturalist, or I am, or like I am a magic realist, or something like that. I've just kind of allowed myself to follow what I do. I realise there's an inherent privilege in that, because I've been doing it long enough. I'm sort of trusted to do that, I think, in terms of radio anyway. But at the moment, who am I reading? I've got a bunch of books here. I'll just look at them now. I've got Virginia Woolf. I love Virginia Woolf. I've got Yaya Lai, who's a Chinese American author who, if you don't know, you should definitely read. She is astounding. I've got Dorthe Nors, the Dutch writer. Dutch writer? I think. Is she Dutch or is she Danish? I think she's Danish. Danish. She's amazing. I've got lots of Richard Brautigan. He's my current hero, and I've also got this as well, which is a brilliant book which I'm adapting for Radio 4 at the moment, which is very exciting, and yeah, very exciting. So in terms of that, in terms of ideas, I think ideas is a different one, and I do a whole I do another workshop on ideas, where you get your ideas from. I think there's loads of different places to get ideas. I think it can be from your personal life, it can be from your personal history. I always think talking to your elderly relatives is always useful. However boring, especially the boring ones, actually, because they know loads of things. That's the reason they're boring. And I also, I'm also a big believer in newspaper and reading newspapers, or reading like news things online. There's I wrote a 5-part women's hour drama for Radio 4 a few years ago called The Other One, which was based on a news story about a little girl who had discovered that she'd been swapped at birth, and then went in search of her real biological parents. And I thought that was a really good story. That was just a small news article on the BBC website, and I used that as a sort of the jumping off point of that radio drama. So I look at all of that stuff. I sort of think you're open to everything. My 3-year-old daughter is a really good storyteller too, so I feel like she's going to provide me with some things as well. Okay, so Michaela. Hi, Michaela. How are you? I hope you're good. If you are adapting a novel or short story for radio, do you need to check if rights are available first? Yes. You do, and you need to find out who they belong to. It can be complicated, but I wouldn't necessarily. I think the key point, if you're doing it for BBC radio, is to make sure it hasn't been done recently. So what I would do is go onto the BBC website and just type in the name of the book to see if it's been done, because I think they don't allow anything that's been done in the last sort of 5 or 10 years, maybe, to be redone. Unless it's Jane Austen. Everyone seems to do Jane Austen all the bloody time. I mean, I love Jane Austen, but seriously. Okay. Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Hang on. Rachel, as a beginner in this, I also have a formatting question. There are resources online for formatting TV scripts properly, but is there a program you use to get a script formatted as a radio script? No, there isn't, and there isn't one that you should pay for. Definitely not. If you have Final Draft, which I'm not assuming because it's really expensive, you can. I think they just have a basic kind of stage play one, and I'd do that. You could also format like a TV one probably, and that would be fine. That's that. I just use Word. And I write it in the way I've always written it. But maybe that's because I'm old now. I don't know. But there isn't a specific radio one that the BBC recommends or anything like that. I think there used to be, but there isn't anymore. And I would avoid it. Formatting, I think, is one of those things that we get a little bit concerned about as writers. This is my best answer, actually. Formatting is something we worry about as writers, but actually, if you've written a good script with a good story, with compelling characters, that's all they care about. They'll fix the script for you if it needs formatting properly, and whisper it. But that's what I do. I just write my plays the way I want them to be, and then the studio manager does it. And it's not because I'm fancy, although I am fancy, obviously. They've always done that because they just get it and go, well, it's not how we need it. So they do a sort of in-house thing. probably get in trouble for saying that, but that's the real answer. I hope that answers your question. Alchemist Productions. Hello, Alchemist Productions. Do you ever get to a stage of inertia during working on a script? For example, falling out of love with the idea or writer's block? Any advice on what to do when you hit a bit of a rut or a wall? That's Hugh. Hi, Hugh. Yes, of course. I get to that point in every play, and I've written something like 40 plays. I think it's inevitable that you're going to hit a point where you feel frustrated or down or are not sure that what you're doing is a good thing. So the thing to do, in my opinion, is it's to step away from it actually and to do something else. Sometimes it's writing something else. Sometimes it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's kind of reading a book. The other way of doing it is actually looking back at your original notes and seeing what you originally loved about it. But I'm a firm believer in, as a writer, you need to feel good to write well. I don't believe in sort of being sad in a garret and that as a mechanism for great art. I don't think that really works. You've got to feel like on an even keel. So when I get stuck, I tend to sort of try and walk away. I'm very lucky in a sense because I've got two very small children, so they keep me really present, and that helps because that can take you out of it immediately. If you don't have two small children, well, congratulations, because you're probably getting more sleep than I am. But I think it's about relaxation, really. I think writer's block is often about anxiety, and it's often anxiety about the quality of what you're doing. I would just try and write as if you don't care, and try and be playful with it. It's called a play for a reason, Hugh. And honestly, that sounds a bit trite, but I do think being playful with it is the only way to sort of conquer these things. And also just going to watch and be with other artists or just having conversations with other people. It can be really helpful. Oh, there's actually one more thing. Actually, it's almost like I planned this, but I definitely didn't. Which is, I got stuck about 14 years ago when I was writing, and I had never really heard of it, but I found this book in my local library. It's The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, and it is it's a very American book, and it's very sort of it feels like a sort of new wave kind of meditative book but it's also incredibly practical about how you can get yourself back into the groove. So if you are stuck, it's got I think it's 12 week program of how to unblock yourself. And it's really good. And a couple of things that are in there, things like artist dates and daily pages, they're great, and I would really recommend sort of in doing them in your life. I think another thing is I write every day if I can, and I have a journal that I keep, which, so if I'm not writing a play, that's quite a good way of keeping up. That's again a really long answer. I hope that's all right. Okay, I'm going to try and answer everyone. I'm going to try and give. Everyone who's here, I'm going to try and get everyone to answer one question before I go back. So if you've asked two questions, that's great, but I might come back to the second question later on. Katie, hi. Just following up on your point about local radio drama hubs, i.e. Salford. How would you recommend approaching into those? Well, they'll probably all have their own writers' room events, BBC writers' room events, which you might be able to go to. I think it will be about finding out the brilliant people who are there are Nadia Molinari, Sue Roberts, Pauline Harris, and Gary Brown. I think there are probably more than that, but those are the four that I know because I've worked with them or had interactions with them, and they're all brilliant. So I would listen out for them. I'll write their names. I'll try and write their names for you now. I won't necessarily get the spellings right. Do that. I'm going to keep. And who else did I set down? Jack Brown. Now, so if you listen out for their radio plays, they produce an awful lot. Pauline did a really good one recently called The Life Cycle of Ospreys, which they recorded remotely. So the two actors were in their own houses. But you wouldn't know. Honestly, it was one of the best pieces of producing I've ever heard. I was incredibly impressed. You can tell I said that, if you want. Carly, hi Carly. For radio, do you always attribute nationality or ethnicity to your characters? And following on from that, if you're writing a character from a certain place, do you write in their accent? Good questions, Carly. So, I do write a nationality and ethnicity to my characters. There's two reasons for that. One is because I try as best as I can to keep my work as diverse as possible. This is both stage work and radio work. And so it's as much as anything else, it's just for me to check that I've actually done the job that I need to do. I think the other thing I would say is it's also about specificity of character. If their nationality and ethnicity is important to the character, then yeah, it's kind of like them having blue eyes. If they're in a film or whatever and it's called Blue Eyes, they need to have blue eyes. But on the other hand, if it's not important, then don't worry about it. I think what I would say is when I wrote History of Paper, there are two things about that script which I think are fun that few people notice because we didn't really make a big thing of it, which is that one, I wanted to be a couple. I wanted to be, if possible, a married couple or a couple who'd like been long term. I'm not married, so it's not a judgment thing. And it's because I wanted to have. I know there are loads of actors who are married to each other and great actors who are married to each other, and I wanted that sort of instant connection so that we really got it. And I think if you listen to it, if you get a chance to listen to it, because it's not online at the moment, you really do get that sense between Mark and Lucy, who've been married for ages. They're there. I also wanted her to be English and him to be Scottish. That was partly because I want to make sure that it's easy to listen to, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I give up on things if they sound too similar. So generational things are great. So if you've got an older actor and a younger actor, that's great because you can hear the difference. And if you've got people from different regions or whatever, that's fantastic. The problem I have is sometimes when you've got, well, let's be honest, a bunch of posh people around a table all talking in the same accent and you're not really sure who's talking. You've got to think about the quality of the voice so that you're communicating your story in the best way possible. That's not to say there aren't great plays with posh people sitting around dinner tables, but it's just that it's not my taste, and I tend to switch off radio drama if I can't distinguish who the actors are. So that's probably my answer. But do I write the character? Do I write their accent? No, I don't. I sometimes will write an inflection. So for example, and I'll write language. So for example, when I'm writing, most of my plays are set in Scotland because that's where I live and that's where I've written most of my career. So I'll use words like we and how and juice in a way that are Scottish rather than English. And the rhythm of Scottish is slightly different, and I can do the rhythm, but I can't do accents on paper. It's just not my thing. But if you do want to do it, if you can do it, fantastic. I don't think there's a problem with doing that. I just don't. I'm going to sip my tea. I hope that's all right. I don't know. I'm really sorry. Is it Fiona? Fiona? It's a lovely name. I don't know how you say it though. Fee. I hope that's all right, Fee. I'm really sorry. I can't say your name. I need to learn how to say people's name. When to pitch an idea during the writing process. For my work, I write detailed visual scenarios and never know where I'm going until the end. It's a form of analysis. Can I pitch a half-formed idea? Not for radio. No. You need the end. If that makes sense. They want to know, especially early on, they need to know that you can get to the end of the story. which sounds a bit tough. What I tend to do, Fiona, that's how you say it. Thank you, Fiona. I'm so sorry. It's a beautiful spelling, though. I really like it. And what was I going to say? So what I do is, and I'm going to talk about this in my third workshop, which I'm going to do with my radio producer on the 30th of June. Put it in your diaries. I write a one-page synopsis of everything. So I just write the beginning. I write what happens in the story all the way through, and I still do that now for all of my radio dramas because I have to. That's how they decide. Because not to go too much detail, but with the fairly obviously there are a lot of different submissions from all the different radio producing houses, and they all have to submit it to BBC commissioning. And so what happens is the commissioners all have to sit down and have to look. First, they look at a paragraph, and if they like that paragraph, they ask for a page, and then they look at the whole page, as it were. And so I've got into the habit of writing a page for my stuff. Now, here's the thing. What I would say is that the page, you write the page to get the commission. Does the play have to be exactly what you wrote on that page? No, it doesn't. Absolutely not. I've pretty much never written what I've said I was going to write. I have in theme and to a certain extent in character, but very rarely in story, because what works in a one-page scenario might not necessarily work in a drama. And so what you want to do is you want to write something compelling that will mean that people have to buy your work, and then you have to write a really good play. Especially, I think that's one thing I would say is if you're going to change it hugely, or not hugely, but if you're going to change it in any significant way, just make it really good. That's easy, isn't it? Just write a really good play. But that's my thing was that I think there are two stages to writing, which is professionally for radio, which is getting the commission and then writing the play. And I don't think they have to be as exact, laid on top of each other as you might think. Because, of course, like creativity is fluid and you're going to change your ideas. So there's no reason at all to sort of stick it, to keep the same thing going along, and just sort of feeling like you have to stick to the same thing that you came up with way back when. Okay, I hope that answers your questions. James. Hi, James. Screenplay structure can be really pedantic. X should occur on page 25, etc. Do screenplay beats translate to radio? Are new radio drama writers judged in the same way on their use of structure? No, we're not. I don't think I think there are seminars on structure and story, and I think they work for some people. I don't know anything about scene structure and screenplay structure. As a writer, as a teacher, I've read about it, but I don't use it myself. And certainly, I'm a very what I'd call an instinctive writer, in the sense that I think that we sort of know innately what a story needs as we go through. So I sort of reject all that stuff. Also, of course, that what would work in a screenplay isn't necessarily going to work for radio in the sense of its timings, because so much of screenplay stuff is based on timing, isn't it? And radio is a bit different than that, because it's 45 minutes or an hour and a half at most. And obviously, if you're writing a series like a women's hour drama, that's 15 minutes every day. Again, it's sort of it's got its own rules, really. I think there are good examples and bad examples, but I won't necessarily go into them right now. But no, I think the answer is no. Okay, have I got any other questions? I don't think I have, so I can go back to Ethan. I'm gonna be a couple more minutes, then I'll stop. But I thank you very much for everyone who's coming, and if you pop off, that's totally fine. But if you have any other questions, do ask. So Ethan asked, I was wondering what you as a writer of radio find are your favourite ones to listen to. What radio dramas are your favourites, etc.? That's a really good one. The ones I've really enjoyed. I really enjoyed the life cycle of Ospreys. I listened to the other day. That was great. There are some really good radio writers. People like Katie Hims. I'm going to write that down. Katie Hims and Robert Forrest. they're both fantastic writers. Obviously, you've got the big guns, people like Lee Hall, Spoonface Steinberg is obviously an amazing radio play. But I also really like some of the swashbuckling ones, like just to listen to on a sort of afternoon. I'll listen to the Patrick O'Brien, or I'll listen to I've got it on my head, but I was going to say, oh yeah, the old Poirot's with John Moffat, fantastic. That's all Radio 4 Extra stuff. I really enjoy that. But in terms of stuff that inspires me as a writer, Al Smith is a really brilliant radio writer. I really like what he does. And who else? I mean, I'm really into listening to first time radio writers, because I think often they bring an awful lot to it. Obviously, there's Roy Williams as well. He writes The Interrogation. He's great. I'm trying to think. There's some really good ones. Sarah Woods is brilliant as well. So these are all brilliant writers, and they're writers who I really really like and listen to a lot. But I just try and listen to whatever I can actually, and often it's it varies quite a lot. So I've got another question from Michaela about 15-minute drama. Is that about 2,500 words? Yes, it is. You're dead on. So I'm going to write that now. 15 minutes is 2,200. I would say to 2,500. There we go. And then I'd say half an hour, 30 minutes is, I reckon, about 5,000. 45 minutes is 700. This is what I'm writing at the moment. So 7.5 to 8. I tend to find that I'm near 8. The other thing I would say is, of course, is that things get cut. So because they need to fit the space, because actually a 45-minute drama is like 44 minutes and 13 seconds. What is always worth doing is slightly overwriting and enabling yourselves to cut. It's actually the other advantage of narration. If you've got a bit too much narration, they can pull it away, and that can be really that can be great because just cutting it off is a really useful way of losing and getting the thing a bit tighter. I've got another question here. Tim Foley. Oh, Tim's brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. Tim's another great writer. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, love Tim. And who else? Timothy X Attack. He's a fantastic writer. He wrote Forest 404, which I really like, and that's a really cool radio drama, which is a series you can still download on podcast. Suzanne, does 1 page to a minute rule apply to radio? No, it doesn't. It probably does if you've got a formatting thing like if you're using Final Draft in a technical sense, but it doesn't work for me. I will usually write about 55 pages for a 45-minute drama, and that's 44 minutes, I said. So no is the answer to that one. As an actor too, we have this is Rachel. As an actor too, we have an instinctive writer. So beyond the 10 ideas, John, 10 brilliant ideas. Do you have any technique to keep your story both surprising to you and to the audience? Do I have any techniques for that? It's a good question. When I wrote History of Paper, and I hope you've all read it or seen it, I think there's a really funny thing, which is that I knew that she was going to go in the way that she does. I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't read it or heard it, sorry. But I did everything I could to make sure the characters didn't know it until the point at which it happened. And I think that is something that works quite well for me. It's just that if the characters don't know what's around the corner, then neither will your audience. You can have something in the distance, and I think that's maybe my tip would be to have an event that happens in the distance which can spark something for you and make everything change. I think that can be really helpful. A moment of kind of significant change. Right, Ben Stevens. I'm more of a planner than instinctive writers. That's interesting. I misread it. That was Ben's question. I'm so sorry. Not Rachel's questions. Rachel's question was, is it worth sending a bit of your radio play? Yeah, absolutely. Why not? please do. I think you've got my email address, so just send it to me. I'll have a listen. Jenny R, is there a difference between writing subtext and writing exposition in radio versus stage? That's a really good question. It's a really difficult one too, and I've only got a couple of minutes. I think you can afford to be your second question, which is maybe part of the same thing, is you can afford to be really subtle, I think, like in radio, because it's intimate, because it's close up, because it's just you or the voice of the actor and your audience, and they're listening to either on the headphones or whatever, but they're listening it to it, not in a crowd. So you can be really intimate with that. I think with stage, obviously you've got the visual, which is different. So you've got the juxtaposition of the actor on stage and what they're saying. So to be really crude about it, you could have a woman stabbing a man saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. And you can understand the subtext that's not necessarily what she means as she does that, or if she does, it's complicated. But with radio, it wouldn't quite work because obviously you don't have that visual element. But I think you can be really, really subtle as a radio writer. I think I probably am a subtle writer in that sense. I try not to beat things over the head. I think the other thing is that the thing with radio is that people listen to it again. People listen to it more than once, and so you can afford to be subtle because people look over it a bit like you would a book or a poem. And so I think you can afford to be subtle. And I think the major difference is just the distance that you're trying to get to the audience. I said on stage you're firing it to the back, but when you're in a radio studio, you're just going, it's really close. It's just a bit more like close-ups. I'm going to try and answer two more questions. Katie. First of all, Ben said, is there a chance you could share some of your one-page pitches? Yes, I am going to do that in the third workshop, and I'm going to talk you through what I did. So yes, or I might even, but maybe at the next Q&A I'll show you one. Just following on from the last workshop task, the 1 minute wordless journey, would this be sound effects only and no dialogue? Yeah, it's no dialogue, but it's not no human. I would say make sure that your voice or the voice of or the breathing of the person who is the main character is actually close. Because the thing about radio is we're following a person. We're not just following sound effects. It doesn't work if we're just hearing footsteps and then a door opening. What you actually want is the person breathing and going, are they nervous? Are they upset? Are they excited? What are they? They could be many of those things, and they can go on that journey. You could do a journey where it's just someone. I mean, if you could do a version of this, which is someone calming down after a panic attack, or the other way around. I think you could, you could totally do that, and that would be a form of journey, wouldn't it? Right. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to either ask them on in an email or message me on Patreon, or I think that's how you say it. I don't know how you say it. It's a nice word though. I like how it looks. But please do keep in contact. Let me know if you have any other questions. Next week's workshop is all about character, dialogue, and story structure. So hopefully that'll be really useful. And just to give you a sneak of the final one, it's going to be about the writing and the producing relationship. And it's going to be about between me and Kirsty, and we're going to break down one of my plays from sort of beginning of an idea to final production. So we're going to go through the whole of that and talk about it. So that's the third one. That'll be on the 30th of June. It's been really nice to talk to you guys. I'm sorry I can't hear voices, but I've really appreciated your questions. They've all been brilliant. Hope I haven't missed anyone out, but if I have, my apologies. And thanks so much. I really do appreciate it. So I'm going to end this live stream now. And again, thank you so much for bearing with me with the little errors that I made at the beginning. It's all new to me, but it's been a really valuable experience for me. Thank you very much, and good night.